Hi, hold on. I'm wearing slippers. Hello. So, I've been reading about this new research project that's been done on Tasmanian convict history called the Founders and Survivors Project. So you know in the 1970s when the Convict Archive reopened and people's attitudes toward convicts had started to change? Well, something else started to change around then as well. Why does everything have to keep changing? It's history. It is literally constantly changing. Give up. Computers! Aha! For one thing, this meant historians didn't have to use quills anymore. But it also gave historians new ways of storing, sorting and analysing historical data. Data? So you know all of those digitised convict archives that you can look at online? Well, they've all been transcribed by historians. Convicted for stealing mutton, cotton, buttons. Yeah, how many buttons? Buttons. The historians then upload this transcribed data into a massive database managed by the Founders and Survivors Project, where every convict has their own unique entry with all of the information that's been found about that convict that gets added to each time new records are transcribed. Historians can then search for specific convicts in the database, like finding the needle in the haystack. And they can find out everything that was recorded about that convict before, during and after sentence, and maybe even about their family members as well. This is called cradle-to-grave history, using diverse records to build up a complex picture of one person's life. But remember who wrote those records? We did. All of those details aren't necessarily true, they're just what was written by the colonial administration. I mean, if a convict is described as troublesome on their conduct record, does that mean they were troublesome or just how the person making the record saw them? You might describe me as a hermit/total nerd. Doesn't necessarily make it true, does it? The convict system was founded on the idea that convicts are bad and need reform. This justified sending them halfway across the world to be punished and put to work. So the colonial administration were always going to lean towards seeing the bad in convicts. The whole system depended on it. The only details they asked were to do with the convicts' lives as criminals or how they might be useful to the colony. They didn't ask, how do you feel? In your own words. Instead, they just recorded what they needed to know. You bake the best scones on the street. You embroider little birds on all of your linen. You sound suitable to me as a housemaid. Can cook and sew. And we've got to consider this context for every detail in the archive. As a 19th century paper system, updated by heaps of different people over years and years and years, the convict archive is neither consistent nor accurate. Names are spelt differently on different documents, ages are guessed, crimes are changed. And while these errors might be frustrating at first, they can actually reveal a huge amount about how the information was collected and when. If instead of looking at an individual convict, we look at the whole collective, we can actually start to see patterns in how the records were made, which can tell us a huge amount about the colonial administration and their systems. This is what's known as reading the archive against the grain. Ask not what the archive wants to tell you, but what the makers of the archive unintentionally reveal about themselves. This is where it gets really exciting. The Founders and Survivors researchers use quantitative techniques, ways of measuring and counting with numbers, to work out the relationships between different data in the archives. It goes way beyond looking at how many convicts were recorded as being born in Ireland, or how many convicts are recorded as being cabinet makers. They can look at if you're an Irish convict cabinet maker, are you more likely to have a crooked nose? Or, I'll stop you there, that's not one of our research questions. But it could be, but it's not. We're most interested in the impact that particular events or experiences had on a convict's life, like the voyage or marriage, and the long-term intergenerational effects on their children and their children's children. And their children's children's children. Yep. And their children's 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 children, maybe. And me, I suppose. Brilliant. There's really only so much that leeches and laudanum can do.